and welcome to another episode of Perspectives with Sherry. I am your host, Sherry Ryan, and today we are honored to have with us a very special guest. We have with us author Mila Maxwell, who wrote the amazing book Finding Lady Baltimore. Um, Really quick, if you're new here, welcome. Over here is a safe space for women in midlife, and all women, actually. We talk all things health, wealth, and empowerment, and all the wonderful things that feed those three themes. Mila, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I am honored to do so. Ladies, I'm going to give you some background on Mila. Mila Maxwell is an author from Clare, Nova Scotia, with a deep rooted passion for storytelling and a love of the outdoors. A proud French Acadian, Mila draws inspiration from both her cultural heritage and her adventurous lifestyle, which includes being a volunteer firefighter. She lives in Sussex, New Brunswick, with her husband Jeremy, her son Bennett, and French bulldog Royce. When not writing, you can find Mila out in nature, at the gym, or helping others through her work in the community. Welcome, Mila. Like I said, it is a pleasure to have you here today. All right. Well, y'all, just like I mentioned, she wrote the amazing book, Finding Lady Baltimore. I have my copy right here. It is a great read. And we're going to talk to her about first, I want to, before we dive into the book, I would like for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your roots, your upbringing, and how storytelling became part of your journey.
Well, like you said, grew up in Clare, Nova Scotia, which is a predominantly French Acadian village. So I grew up speaking French, but my uncles growing up had girlfriends that were Anglophone because the neighboring town called Yarmouth is predominantly Anglophone. So I grew up very bilingual. Went to school, like grade school, all in French. And then once I hit university, 4 years, that was in English. So yeah, kind of seamlessly going between French and English. Storytelling was not like, I don't know. I mean, we had assignments in grade school that focused on creative writing, and then when I went to school, university, it was journalism, and it was a different kind of storytelling because with journalism, while you have to be descriptive in a way, you have a certain word count. It's to the point. There's not much embellishment, not much, in my opinion, creativity. But when it came to writing this book, it was a lot different. So yeah, writing was something that I sometimes did for assignments, but it was never something that I did in my spare time. It was never something like I never journaled or anything like that, even though it was suggested that I do so. Yeah, and I'm sure you'll ask this question later. But yeah, the idea for the book kind of just came organically, and I just kind of ran with it.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So I mentioned you're not only a writer, but a volunteer firefighter, which I find fascinating. How do you think those two roles, what do you think those two roles teach you about connection, community, and resilience?
It's relationships, right? And I think sometimes we can feel alone. We can feel that our struggles are unique, that no one understands what we're going through. And that's what I like about writing. That's what I like about firefighting is, we can disagree about things. We can have different perspectives on things. But when something happens, it's amazing how we can come together and be there, like in firefighting for our community. We have one goal, and it's to keep those people safe, to keep their homes safe, whether it's a fire, a car accident. You put yourself in their shoes and what they might be feeling. They're probably obviously scared for a number of reasons. So that's what my book touches on a lot is understanding other people's perspectives for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what inspired you to write Finding Lady Baltimore, and how closely does the story reflect your own family's experiences?
The book was never something consciously anyway that I was like, oh, in the summer of 2022, I'm going to start writing a book. The time's going to be right. It was just something that came about. And I really feel it was because of a conversation that I had with my mother. And I think I had slowed down long enough to realize that there was a story there to tell. I had sold my business a few years prior. I had made the decision with the gentle support of my husband to say, you know what, you're maybe a little burnt out from, I used to own a nutrition business. And he said, you know what, take some time to just ground yourself, to figure out what you want to do next. And I had gone home, and my sister, spoiler alert, has cerebral palsy. And we're a year and a half apart, and it's always been challenging. Like any sibling relationship has its challenges, but ours was a bit more laced in guilt, which I know you're going to touch on later. But I had gone home, and she and I got into a fight about stupid something, like sisters often do. And I remember feeling so embarrassed. I said, I'm a mother. My son, I think, was 7 at the time. And just feeling so mortified that I had let something so silly get between us. So my mom drove her, she lives in a special care home, drove her home, and I just was stewing in the sunroom. And mom said, what is going on? And I basically spewed out like 35 years of resentment, self-hatred, all of these negative emotions that I portrayed onto myself, saying I'm never good enough for her. I feel like I should be more for her. I feel like I should be better for her. And my mom, she could have easily turned this the wrong way, but she said, Mila, no one has those expectations of you but yourself. Mm. She said, she doesn't have those expectations of you. She said, she's just happy to see you. So she said, if she FaceTimes you at 8 a.m. and you're busy getting Bennett ready for school, you don't have to answer, and you don't have to feel bad about it, because she doesn't understand those boundaries. She doesn't understand, like, oh, Mila's probably getting Bennett ready for school right now. Maybe I shouldn't call. She just thinks of me and says, I want to call my sister.
Yeah.
So mom and I had a really good chat, and I was able to kind of release a lot of that hatred. And I'm not even kidding. A week later, I got the idea for the book as I was falling asleep one night. And I said, holy smokes. I said, it was a sentence I got in my head. And I said, that's the book, and I'm going to run with it. And run I did. And I'm glad that it was like a full body, like, oh my God. I was like shaking. I was like, that's a book. That's a book. And yeah, it's amazing. I started the next morning and didn't stop till it was done.
Oh gosh, that's amazing. And ladies, you have to get the book. It is a wonderful read. It's a really, really good book. Congratulations on that, by the way. Very good book. Yeah. So you explore the bond between sisters, one with a disability. What did you want readers to understand or feel about sibling dynamics through that lens?
To start, and this is something that I've learned, that whether you have a sibling with a disability or not, sibling relationships, I think, can be challenging. I think you can have expectations of what they should look like. And that was the case for me. You know, I looked at my friends that had, I'm going to say, quote, normal siblings. And I say that in the book as well, with a disclaimer to say, you know, you're going to hear this language. It's by no means meant to be offensive, because that's the way the story starts, is with a conversation with my grandmother saying to her, I wish my sister was normal. But yeah, it's there's a lot of challenges with that, because as normal as I wanted us to be, it was never going to be that way. We were never going to talk about boys late at night and share clothes to go to the dance. And we were never going to talk about, you know, oh, I kissed this boy, or, you know, I'm thinking about having sex with so-and-so. Like, it was never going to be that kind of relationship. And I think that relationship fell more to, I have 2 cousins that I'm quite close with on either side of my family. And I had more of a sister relationship with them. But back to your question about that, the sibling relationships, is I wanted us to be as normal as possible. And I would treat her as such, but then it was always laced with a layer of guilt to say, you know what, does she really understand what I'm saying? Should I really have snapped at her? She doesn't necessarily understand why I did that. So it was never just like telling her how I felt or being angry or frustrated. There was always that, like, why couldn't I have done better? I should be more patient with her. So it was always extra. There was always an extra layer, or extra layers, I should say, when it came to Sarah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that brings us to my next question. Guilt is a quiet character in this book. Why was it important to explore how guilt can shape identity and relationships, especially within family? And I think that's so important because, much like what you said, whether you have a sibling that, it's not because you are telling from the perspective of having a sibling with a disability or special needs, but sibling relationships or relationships and families are complicated within itself. Guilt, regardless of that aspect, plays in relationships for many just different reasons. Family dynamics, and so what? So why did you feel the need to explore guilt as an identity in relationships within the family in the book?
First of all, I love how you asked that question, or I love how you phrase it, that guilt was a quiet character, because I think there's many hidden characters within the book, and guilt and shame are definitely two of them. But yeah, I think, I always felt like, why was I spared? And she was the one that, and not that I would ever want her life, because I have a great life. And I think it's based on, it's because of her. I think, Sarah's never going to experience this, or she's never going to have the chance to do that. So when I get the chance to do something, I do it 100%. I do it wholeheartedly, because it's not that, it's almost, it's not oh, I get to do this and you don't. It's I have the privilege of doing this, and I'm extremely grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fortunate in the way that Sarah's comprehension is, she would never think, oh, my sister, she's so lucky that she gets to do that and I don't. And she doesn't feel bad about herself. She is literally my number one fan. Like, she is so just happy and pleased and just in love with me. And I had to learn to love myself in order to be able to love her the way she loves me, which is a part of the book. But yeah, guilt is a huge thing. And whether, like you said, whether we have a sibling with a disability or a family member with a disability or not, we're all going to feel guilt at some point.
Absolutely.
But I think, like the previous question, there's layers there, because you want that normal relationship, but it's never going to be that way. So I had to learn to accept things, and it took me an extremely long time. I'm talking like I just turned 40, and it probably took me close to 40 years to be like, you know what, this is the way it is, and we are a beautiful family, and she is beautiful, and she has taught me so many things that she shaped who I am, and I don't know if I would be who I am without her. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you read that part in the book that I asked, and a lot of it is fiction, but a lot of it's true, and a lot of the conversations that are in that book have happened. And I said to my dad, like, I wonder who she would be if she didn't have cerebral palsy. And he's like, she wouldn't be her. She wouldn't be herself, and we wouldn't be us either.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. In your view, how do family dynamics in childhood shape the way we love, protect, or even abandon parts of ourselves later in life? That's a deep one. Yeah,
that is a deep one, and I think there's a lot of things that we need to unlearn, because and especially myself, I thought, I always had very high expectations of people, and I'm learning later in life to not do that. But, I didn't necessarily see my family or my parents as people, right? I held them to such high expectations to think that, they're still learning. They weren't just given these children and knew what to do with them. They had one child who was born, me first, who was relatively normal, didn't have to be rushed to a different hospital by ambulance when she was born, didn't have these questions around her birth, thinking like, what's wrong with her? Why did she stop breathing? Right? So there was a big contrast between us, and it wasn't easy for them either. They were learning as they went, and they were not only learning how to parent a normally functioning child, they were learning to parent alongside a child that had a lot of challenges, that needed surgeries, that needed extra care, like crutches or wheelchairs, or what happens when she starts school? Is she going to need a educational assistant, which she did? So a lot of extras there. So I think it shaped me in the way that I said this to someone last week when I went home to my parents. I said, I'm curious to know how much of my personality is me, and how much was shaped by me having to put on an older kind of persona at a very young age, right?
Mm-hmm.
To almost be not a third parent to her, but to see things through my parents' eyes and to see the dangers or see the challenges and be more empathetic. And I
Yeah.
think for me, that was a challenge because I think I've been very empathetic from a very young age. I just didn't understand it. And back then it came out as frustration. It came out as anger. It came out as defiance because I didn't know how to process it. And it's not like now where we know to talk about mental health. We know to talk about things that bother us, to have those support systems. It just didn't exist. It was never something I went to my parents with to say, I'm scared.
Yeah.
When she did this, it really upset me. Like I never talked like that. We didn't talk like that when I
Yeah.
was younger.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, like you don't even have that language at that age, but so it comes out in different ways, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I find that very interesting. And so my next question is, were there moments in writing this book where you found healing or clarity for your own personal journey? And-
Oh, the whole thing. The whole
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, and there were certain parts, like usually what I would do, and I was extremely consistent, is once my son left for school around 10 to 8, I would sit down and I would write until about noon. Sometimes it would be longer, sometimes it would be a little less time, but I really tried to be consistent with my writing. And there were some mornings that I'd write for an hour and I would just be so drained and so exhausted that I'd have to go either sleep or do something else because it was a lot of things that I had pushed down and repressed for so long that I felt needed to come out, but I had to make sure that it didn't all come out at once
Yeah.
because it was extremely overwhelming. Like during the process of writing this, I had to, and I think that had to do with COVID as well, and managing a lot of stuff because my husband still worked outside the home while I was still managing a business from home while taking care of a child. I did start taking sertraline, which is like a low dose, like anti-anxiety, anti-depression, which used to be very, I used to be very embarrassed to say that. I just started taking it a couple of years ago, but yeah, I was like, you know what? If this can help me tell
Absolutely.
this tell this story, but still stay sane while doing it,
Right.
I'm gonna try it. And I said I'll try it for a year, and it's been good. So I'm like, why stop taking it? But
Absolutely.
it was a very heavy thing to unpack, which is kind of a
Yeah.
coincidence because there's a suitcase involved in the book.
I know, it's so clever.
But yeah, it was a lot, but it was an extremely, extremely healing experience. I feel like it has changed me, as corny as it sounds, as a person. I feel different when I go home to visit. They live about 6 hours away. And yeah, there isn't that heaviness anymore when I go to visit. There isn't that burden of expectation. I can just be myself and just relax. And there's no fighting. There's no resentments. It's just like, hey, like I'm here. Let's enjoy our own company and
Yeah.
spend some time together. Like
That
it's
is
fantastic. It's
awesome.
changed my whole family dynamic.
That is awesome. That is so, so awesome. So my next question, do you think, and you pretty much are saying this, but do you think there's freedom in telling stories rooted in truth, even if they're fictionalized? And how did writing this help you make peace with your past or parts of it?
I think it helped me make peace with all of it, honestly, because it was all these little things that I would just push down and say, oh, you know, what I'm feeling is not important. Sarah's needs and what Sarah needs is more important. So I think you can kind of forget if you're the sibling of someone with needs or a disability or disabilities, you tend to learn to push what you need and what you feel aside. And with her, it was, she had a lot of anxiety and didn't necessarily understand things that were going on. So we had to not really hide things from her, but
Mm,
if she had an appointment coming up, we couldn't tell her a week in advance because she would be worried about it all week,
right.
right? Because she didn't like hospitals because she's been in them so much. So mom would have to basically tell her the morning of, like, by the way, we're going to Halifax today. And it was that, that freak out that morning was worth not telling her earlier to be able to have the week free of anxiety. But I don't know if that answered your question. You can ask it again if you
No,
want.
yeah, you did. I mean, basically, you were saying that it helped you to make peace with all of your past, the things that
It
you've
did.
repressed and put down, pushed down, that you were able to now make peace with all that. But I
And
did kind of want to add on. You know, you were saying how because of how you were conditioned to be with your sister. I wonder, did that affect your other relationships? Did you feel like you had to show up for everybody like that?
Yep, I did. I went to therapy for that because it was something that I noticed more when I became a mother myself about 11 years
Mm.
ago. That I was so, I don't know if you can hear my dog snoring at my feet. But yeah, it was something that I had to unlearn because with Sarah, I was so conditioned to monitor her because she wasn't able to say, you know, my stomach hurts. I think I'm going to be sick. I have a headache. I feel uncomfortable in this situation. She wasn't able to, she can speak, but she was not able to articulate that. So it was, we were always on high alert. Like if she was laughing, you might say, Sarah, don't laugh so much. You might pee yourself. So I had to unlearn that when I had Bennett because it was, it was exhausting, but B, I said,
Sure.
you know what? He's his own person. And once he learned to speak, I said, he needs to learn that he can tell me those things. But yeah, like your question asked, like the same with my friends, like I had to really I had to learn to not be that type of person because it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Like people, you know, if someone's visibly upset or struggling, I think it's okay to ask like, hey, are things okay? But you
Right.
don't have to constantly be vigilant and to put your needs aside. And I think especially as women, that's something that's a boundary that we're not always taught because we are
Hmm.
meant to be caretakers,
Yeah.
not to generalize, but yeah, it's something I think as women that is seen as if you are not like that, you're considered selfish, and
Yeah.
it's not, and it's something, you know, I one of my therapists had said, you know, if you're used to being a people pleaser and you're on this spectrum or this end of the line, and the other spectrum is a doormat, if you move this way a little bit, you might be in your mind thinking, oh my God, I'm such a horrible person because you've
Right.
moved from that way just slightly, but you're not used to it. So that
Mhm.
was something I had to really be firm on and say, you know what? No, my mental health right now is not great. I need a day to myself. I need to take care of myself so I can take care of other people.
That's
But
right.
yeah, to your point, it was learning those boundaries, learning to listen to what I actually needed after so many years of not listening to that.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you got there.
Same. It's very freeing.
Yes, I can imagine. So how do you define emotional legacy? What we pass down beyond genetics, and how is that portrayed in your characters?
Yeah, so that I think is a heavy one, and especially, oh my goodness, Royce, um, especially being a French Acadian, you know, in the late 1700s or the mid 1700s, my people were deported. You know,
Hmm.
these people came and literally kicked my people off our land, and guess what? We came back with a fury.
Yeah.
But you know, I think there's a lot of that, but I think my culture, we don't necessarily dwell on it. We talk about it and that, you know, this happened and it shaped us. But we, I think, like to see it as it made us resilient, it made us stronger, it made us who we are. But we don't see it as a weakness. We don't see it as, oh, you know, these people came and they thought they were better than us, so they kicked us off. We choose to see that in a different light. At least I do. But when it comes to families, it's the same thing. Like I'm French Acadian from long ago. And yeah, I think the emotions within a family can definitely get transferred on to the next generation. And I
Yeah.
think that was something that I took very seriously. And I was seeing patterns being repeated. And I said, you know what? I don't like this.
Hmm.
I want that to end with me because I'm not crapping on my family. They did the best they could with what they had,
Absolutely.
right? And I think every family does the best with what they have. But I see patterns and I said, you know what? I don't want to repeat those patterns. I don't want Bennett, when he becomes a parent, if that ever happens, hopefully not soon, he's 11, but when that time comes, that he can say, you know what, no, it's my mother and my parents decided to work on themselves and to see their flaws. And I'll give you an example. So in my upbringing, if, and I won't name names, but if someone screwed up or if someone was harsh or yelled or said something, it was never discussed. It was never, the adults in my family never came to me and said, you know what, the other day or earlier today, I said this and I was harsh. I apologize. I'm sorry that if I made you feel small. It was never discussed. And that was something that really bothered me, because I think all those times that it happened, it just kept piling on and piling on. And I think, man, what is wrong with me? Like, do people just not like me as a person? So when I started doing that, I was like, no, I don't like this. And I would apologize to my son to say, you know what, earlier you were pushing my buttons and I was tired or I was not feeling well and I snapped at you. And I said, I'm sorry about that. Like, you didn't deserve that. And sometimes, kids, they need to be told. And right. I have to remind him sometimes, I am your parent. You're not going to always like my decisions, but I want that respect to come through, that even though he is a young child, that he does have a voice. He can agree or disagree. It might just be overruled sometimes because, again, I'm his mother. But right. Yeah, there was a lot of that in there, and it felt good to talk about it openly. And especially when I was writing the book, it wasn't just my sister's perspective that I was able to see fictionally, because she's not really necessarily able to tell me, but I wanted my parents' perspective in there too. So I was forced to talk to them. I said, can you tell me some stories? Like my mom, for instance, can you tell me some stories of when you had to drive Sarah to Halifax to get surgery? And I think sometimes the father's role in all of this and in the family it can be overlooked. You see ads for diapers, you see all these ads for kids things, and it's always the mother. And it's like, well, dads are there too, right? Dads play an important role, even though it's not always like, it's always the mom that's nurturing. It's like, no, dads can be nurturing too. So I really hoped that my book was able to shine a light on every family member's perspectives, whether you do have a sibling that has a disability or not. That was something that surprised me, that, when I was writing this, my publisher said, next time you write a book, try to write it with an audience in mind. And I didn't do that with the first one. And I'm in a way happy that I didn't know that or chose not to do it, because when I was writing it, I said, it's written from my 17-year-old's perspective. And I said, is this going to be more of a young adult? Is it going to, tailor more to girls? And it was shocking, because a lot of my dad's friends and my parents' friends who are male read it. And I was shocked at their feedback to say, you know what, I could see myself through your dad in this story. And I was like, oh my gosh, like 60, 70, 80-year-old men that are reading this who can see themselves, because they had a family too. They had, whether they had boys or girls or, right, it was, anyone can see themselves in the characters in this book.
Yeah, I think that's what was so great about it. And that's why I made the point of, whether that was your experience or not, you're going to find something in this book that's going to make you reflect on your own relationship and family dynamics. I thought it was so well written, and it can speak to any of us. You can see yourself in some of the characters in some way. So I think you did an amazing job doing that.
Thank you.
Yes. So what role did love, familiar or otherwise, play in holding these characters together or tearing them apart?
That's a deep question, because I think sometimes we can mistake anger, or we can mistake guilt, or we can mistake those negative emotions as that. We can mistake it as something that's negative, but sometimes it's hidden as fear, it's hidden as love, that it's like, I love these people so much, but I'm not always able to show it, or I don't know how to express it, so it comes out wrong. And I think that was me as a child, that I feared for her. I loved her so much. I worried about her. I looked sometimes like, are people looking at her? Are they
Yeah.
judging her? And I just want to go and like be like, what are you staring at? And
Yeah.
I can recognize that now as love. It was not a burden. It was not a negative thing. It was a protective kind of element that was there as her older sibling.
Yeah, all of that rooted in love, and I love that too. I think sometimes, when we're talking about the guilt piece, when things show up as anger or frustration or fear, if you look at the crux of that, the root of that, it all is love. And I think
Yeah,
that yeah, that within
yeah,
itself was a great theme and something to really think about. So yeah, yeah,
yeah,
um,
for sure.
yeah. So your sister's presence and experience clearly influenced the story. What is one lesson she's taught you that changed the way you see the world and yourself?
Whew. Um, a lesson. Well, I think she doesn't overthink things. Like if
Mm,
she doesn't care how people see her. And
mhm.
I know that there's a sentence earlier on in the book that says something along the lines of, I wonder if that's the secret to being happy, or the secret to being content is not worrying so much what people think of you. Like if
Yeah.
I walk through a room and she's there, she's like, like these huge emotions come out. She's like, Mila, and
No.
she hugs me so tight that I think I'll break in half.
Oh.
She doesn't hold back what she's thinking. She doesn't hold back what she's feeling. And while I think in normal society, I think you kind of have to in certain cases.
Right.
It's sort of beautiful to see when she does that, because she doesn't think society like, what are they going to think? I'm being too loud. I'm being too much. I'm wearing really bright clothes. Like she doesn't give a shit.
I
she
love that.
doesn't
I love that.
she doesn't care. So I can, I try to learn from her, because I think I can be a little bit more modest. I can be a little bit more quiet and kind of have my guard up a little bit, because I've been hurt in the past, and I kind
Mm.
of like feeling safe and not always putting myself out there. But yeah, I think that's a beautiful lesson that I've learned from her, is to, sometimes it's okay to be too much. And if you love someone, tell them.
That's it. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit. And I'm asking you, what kind of feedback have you received from readers, especially those who may see themselves in your story's themes of sibling care, invisible guilt, or complex love?
That was one. So I did a book club with a few people, probably a couple months ago now, at the local. There's a civic center here. Roy, stop snoring so loud. So there's a lady that I know, and she was one of the main caretakers for one of her brothers who has, I think he's passed away now, but he had a
Mm,
disability. And she said, I could see myself in this story while I was reading it. And I pointed to her and I said, that's exactly why I wrote this. And I
mhm.
said, yeah, selfishly, I wrote it for myself. But secondly, it was for people that grew up the way I did, to be able to see themselves, to understand that they matter, they have a voice, they're allowed to feel things, they're allowed to be frustrated. And I think that's a key word, the word "and," that you can
Yeah,
feel so much love, but you can also feel frustrated.
absolutely.
You can be happy, but also have that layer of sadness underneath. And I'll give you an example. So the day that Jeremy and I got married, 14 years ago, my goodness, my sister Sarah was the maid of honor. And I
Mm,
remember getting ready and my mom and I kind of chatting. And I said, you know what, as happy as I am today, I said, I also feel a little bit sad. I said, she's never going to get to experience this. She's never going to fall in love. She's never going to, oh my gosh, like we're going to have kids soon. Like she'll never get to experience that. And she said, Mila, she doesn't think that way. She's just
mm,
so happy to be included in this day. She's just so
yeah,
happy for you. And I think of that conversation often, to think, she doesn't think that way.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's obvious. And I know it's easy in the book. We say that, there's a couple instances where my dad and I have conversations like, how do you know what she's thinking? But it's obvious. It's obvious she doesn't like, I'll never get married, or I'll never have kids, or she's just happy for me. She's just happy
Yeah,
for everyone around her, which is very inspiring.
it is. It is refreshing as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you hope families, especially sisters or caretakers, take away from this story?
I think it's, and I'll use my own example, that I may have seemed okay in a lot of instances, but I wasn't.
Mm,
So that if you're a parent or a caretaker to both someone with a disability and someone that's not, the person that is quote normal or doesn't have the disability, they might be struggling. They might just not say anything because they don't want to add to the stress. They don't want to add to the emotions, so they keep to themselves a lot more. So it's,
mm.
I think it's important to always check in,
Yeah.
and to also realize, like, when when we're younger, like, I had options. I had, a teacher in my school had a sister with cerebral palsy, and my mom had come to me once and said, this teacher reached out and said, if you ever want to talk to her, that she's there for you. And I didn't. And I don't
Mm,
know if it's because when you're young, you don't know how to process things, you don't know how to talk
right.
about things. But she and I recently connected, and I actually was able to go speak to her grade 3 class when I went home a couple of weeks ago. So that was nice that we got to talk about the book and talk about our siblings. And I mentioned to her, like, yeah, when I was like 10, Mom mentioned that you would be open to talking to me, and I never did. I just
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, to have those conversations and to recognize that even though your children might seem okay, maybe they're not, and to just
Yeah.
do one-on-one things with them, and to maybe ask the right questions. And they might not come out and say things. You might have to pry a little bit.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's important. Okay. Now, so the big question is, Mila, will there be a follow up to Finding Lady Baltimore, or are there other stories you feel called to write that explore similar emotional terrain?
Yeah, I've been asked that many times, and
I'm sure.
my answer is that I just birthed this one. So,
Right.
but yeah, I feel like a lot of my brain cells and a lot of my story went into this one. So I think it'll be a little while before there's another one. I would like there to be another one.
Okay.
And yes, it's something that a lot of people have asked, which I appreciate, because I'm like, oh, well, maybe they like the second one enough. They'd like to see another one. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I hope to someday. I really don't know what it would be about. I do email myself if I wake up in the night with an idea. I'll be like, oh, this might be something. But no, I'm not really sure at this time. But yeah, maybe in the future, maybe
In
in the
the
next few
future.
years. Yeah.
All right. We'll be looking out for that. So, okay, in this part, I always like to take time to ask my guests what projects or events they've got coming up. How can we support? And then after that, I'd like for you to take the time to share your social media handles and how we can find you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess when we first started chatting, it's been a busy summer. My son's in baseball, so my husband and I often will divide and conquer, because I think they have 2 games today, 2 games tomorrow. We have a new puppy, so now we have 2 dogs. So just lots going on. I also am co-owner of a functional fitness gym, so that keeps me busy, as well
Okay,
as
I'm
the
sure.
firefighting and managing the household. But yes, to support me, I think, yeah, if you can resonate with anything we've said today, like, check the book out. It's on Amazon. It's called Finding Lady Baltimore. And yeah, when you're done, feel free to leave a review. And yeah, my Instagram and Facebook, you can just type up Mila Maxwell author, and I'll show up there. But yeah, follow along, and it's to have these discussions, right? Whether your sibling or siblings are disabled or not, just to have these family discussions, to say, you know what, we might seem normal on the inside, but everyone's got their stuff, right? And it's
Absolutely.
okay to talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that is what my takeaways were. I think I will go on record to say, if you haven't, y'all, get your copy of the book. You will not be sorry. Like I said, it was an excellent read. I could not put it down. Um, if you, like I said, no matter how your family is set up, all family dynamics, you're going to take away something from the book. So definitely get your copy, read it, and leave a review. And y'all, if you go on Amazon and check out the reviews, they are raving. So you want to be a part of this club, get the book, and definitely leave her feedback. Mila, I just want to say again, thank you so much for being here. I have thoroughly enjoyed this interview. Your voice is amazing, and you're helping a lot of people. The book, again, I can't say enough. It was excellent, and congratulations to you. Um, and I'm so glad that you found a way to cathartically get your story out that not only helped you heal and grow, but it's helping other people. So that's amazing. Thank you
Thank
again
you.
for being, yeah,
Thank you. And I think, yeah, that was the part that, at first I was like, am I going to write a memoir? Am I going to write fiction? And I think writing it in fiction, I was able to have so much more fun with it because there was a
yeah,
bit of a layer of separation to say, you know what, this feels too personal, but hey,
yes.
it's fiction. So
Fiction, right?
no one's gonna know what's real, what's not. So yeah, that would be my definite takeaway is if you have a story to tell, like whether you have a writing background or not, just start. And whether you publish it or not, just write it for you and you might surprise yourself. Right?
Yeah,
You might be surprised to say, wow, this is a really good story and have other people read it and give you feedback. And it's in a way, it's a little bit scary to put yourself out there. But I think if you feel it deep in your soul that you have a story to tell, do it for the right reasons. Do it for you. And I was just lucky enough to do it for myself, but to be able to reach other people in the process.
yeah, yeah. And she
Mm-hmm.
did, y'all. And so you take that wisdom from her. I always say, encourage my audience that, you know, just because you found yourself midlife and we say statistically maybe more life is behind us than in front of us, it is never too late. Start today, tell your story, write the book, start the podcast, start the business, whatever it is within you that you thought that you couldn't do, you can do it. And no better time than to start but now. So
Never too late.
absolutely, never ever too late. So thank you so much, Mila. And thank you all for watching. If you haven't yet, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and get the book. All right. So at this point, we're going to say goodbye. And I always like to end with reminding you all to continue to feed your health, build your wealth, and to continue to walk in power. All right, ladies, we are going to bid you goodbye. Thank you again.